And welcome back. Let's go ahead and add just a little bit more detail to our water and island here, which is of course adding a little bit of variation around our shoreline to really kind of simulate having rocks here. So to get started, I'm going to go to my color picker and grab the brown that I previously had used here. So I'm going to make sure I'm on my ground layer to start and go ahead and grab that color. And going back to my brush tool, let's go ahead and actually take that same color I had and let's go ahead and darken that. Take it down a little bit and click OK. And what I'm going to do, I'm just not going to start randomly making passes here because I want to first make sure that I'm only working on this ground layer here. So let's actually just go ahead and I'm going to use the magic wand tool to go ahead and select that region. And what that's going to let me do is pretty much stay within inside this zone here. So I'm not going to go ahead and start painting outside. I don't want to, for example, paint into these grass regions here. I only want to be in the areas where I have the brown. So again, I'm going to go ahead and select both of those using the shift key. So now I'm just on the brown zones, which is perfectly fine. And now we, of course, can go ahead and start filling in these different spots. So what I'm going to do is go back to my pencil tool. And I'm actually just going to, with the pencil tool, just go ahead and just start making some random marks here. Now you notice these might be a little too light, so I'm actually going to back this up a little bit and actually take this just a little darker, because it's not quite standing out to the level that I want it to. There we go, that looks good. And again, I'm just going to pretty much make some straight lines here with this. And as I move towards the edges, I'm going to do more diagonals. And it's okay if I'm doing this, I'm painting into the grass region here, because again, in those zones, it doesn't matter as much because this is all masked by the grass layer. All right, that looks pretty good. And then over here, we're doing the same thing. We're going to go vertical here and do more diagonal along the sides. All right. And now let's go ahead and switch to a lighter tone here. So I'm actually going to bring this up, move us up actually a little more into the orange area a little bit. And we want kind of a lighter tone here. Maybe that looks pretty good. And this is going to be our highlights. So these are just going to kind of go right alongside the dark colors that we had previously just put in here, just to add some color variation. And we're going to repeat this all the way throughout here. Everywhere I painted that darker color, I'm just going to go ahead and again just paint these in. All right, and now I just need to do over here on my inland. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now I did notice one thing is that we do have this brown area down here because our grass pattern did not quite select all the way down here. So I'm going to go to my grass layer real quick here. And you can see that does not select down to here. We have a little bit of an absence in our pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead and deselect real quick and grab this region right here that I have. And let's just go back to our paint bucket tool, do a pattern, make sure we have our grass, fill in it. Now, of course, we don't have that filling in with the proper grass behind it. You notice that it didn't fill it in. So I first need to make sure I'm filling that in with that base green color that I had originally. Going back to my paint bucket tool, do a foreground, and we'll just fill that in super quick. Switch back to our pattern. Boom. All right, so we addressed this area that looks golden. And now, going back to deselect, let's take a look at how this pattern is looking. I do see I had a couple brush strokes that snuck through here on my lake, and I can clean those up really quickly using my eyedropper tool and make sure I go to that lake layer, which remember here, it's here on my ground layer, and that's why we're having a little bit of that bleed through. So I'm just going to go ahead and just really quickly just go ahead and just grab my brush tool here and just pencil those back into the proper blue color. Now, if you have a little bit come through, you might say, I want to have a little bit of shadowing in the lake, and that's okay. But I had just a little too much for my taste, and so I still have a couple small shadows here, which is fine. But I just wanted to clean that up. All right, for the next challenge here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and try to address this in such a way that we can get these color tones here to kind of match up a little bit more. So for example, we have right now this lighter tone here that's not affected by our hue saturation values, and we do have this darker tone here, because remember, this is kind of supposed to be more for inland, whereas this is more for out in the ocean. So what I want to do though is I'm going to first start by addressing this shape here, and I want to go ahead and use my color picker tool to grab that nice dark blue that I had here. And I want to actually take that same blue, and I'm actually going to just bring it over to the lighter section just a little bit to kind of help represent a shoreline. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to zoom this in so we can see right along our edges here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my pencil tool and paint along here 1 pixel each to kind of fill this edge in. And all it's going to do is help break this up between the darker and lighter areas. And so when I do this, I'm just going to zoom out real quick here and zoom back in just a little bit, and you can start seeing how it kind of just simulates a shoreline there along this edge here. Now we aren't going to paint along the top edges here, but I'm going to go ahead and pause the video real quick. Let's see you go ahead and paint this in here, and then I want you to challenge yourself and see how you can do it for the inner island here, for this little inland here. How do you think you can do it here? And I'll see you back in a second. And welcome back. So I went ahead and did a couple small modifications here, and I of course added the color border here. I also went and repainted this core because I wanted this to look a little darker, so I simply just color picked my darker color and added it here. But you also see I took an even lighter blue to kind of help add some shoreline effects here to kind of really help simulate water that might, for example, be crashing against rocks or other pieces here along the shoreline. And so that's just a simple matter of just adding a couple dots. Also did the same thing here. This of course can also help simulate things like, for example, motion, like so water might be crashing up against these edges here, and it just helps add a little bit more layer to our pixel art. And so just like that, we've created a very nice piece of water in land. But what is the next step we need to do to kind of really help take our next step towards making more in-depth pixel art?